This is Caytlyn Naffziger. You can see her here with her daughter, Ellen. In this photo, you can see her as she was in life, holding one of her children close. She's dead now. She's dead because the defendant, Dustin Duren, the father of her children, murdered her. As Caytlyn sat on the couch, holding her 4-year-old daughter Ellen on her lap, very much like you see there, the defendant ripped Ellen from Caytlyn's arms. He stepped back, pointed his 9mm Beretta semi-automatic pistol at Caytlyn's head, and pulled the trigger. The defendant was still holding Ellen in his arms when he murdered her mother. The sound of the gunshot hurt Ellen's ears. After the defendant killed Caytlyn, he took Ellen and her 1-year-old sister, Valen. He packed their things, put them in his car, and began driving. He got all the way to Concord, where he called his parents, and he confessed. He told them that he had killed Caytlyn. He said he was going dark, and he shut off his phone, making it impossible for the authorities to track his location. The defendant's father called the Berlin police. The police went to the defendant's apartment and found Caytlyn there, dead. A few hours later, in the early morning hours of March 1st, 2024, an Amber Alert went out, including descriptions of the defendant, the girls, and the defendant's car. It was that Amber Alert that led to the defendant's arrest, after a citizen told the Keene police that she saw the defendant's car heading in the direction of an Applebee's in Keene. The police found the defendant in his car in the parking lot of Applebee's. Ellen and Valen were in the back seat. The murder weapon, that 9mm Beretta semi-automatic pistol, was in the driver's side door. After his arrest, the defendant gave an interview with the New Hampshire State Police. He told them his version of the story, his version of what happened between him and Caytlyn. He told the police that he wanted Caytlyn to leave his apartment, and when she wouldn't, he got angry. He tried to take Ellen from Caytlyn, but she refused, and he got angry. So he went to his desk, grabbed his gun, and used it to kill the mother of his children. You can see the words "very deliberate" up there on the screen. Those are his words, the defendant's words. Those are the words that he used to describe his killing of Caytlyn Naffziger when he spoke to the police. Ladies and gentlemen of this jury, this will not be a case that is difficult to understand. This will not be a whodunit. There will be no mystery. The evidence will prove to you, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Dustin Duren murdered Caytlyn Naffziger. The evidence will also show you why he did it. This is a case about anger and control. According to the defendant, he and Caytlyn had argued over the course of the day. He wanted her to leave and go back to Minnesota, where she was from. And when Caytlyn refused to do what he wanted, and he couldn't control her actions, he got angry. So he took his gun, pointed it at Caytlyn, and pulled the trigger. It was, as he said, a very deliberate act. During this trial, the state will provide you with evidence that proves beyond a reasonable doubt that Dustin Duren is guilty of the murder of Caytlyn Naffziger, as well as the crimes of reckless conduct with a deadly weapon and endangerment of a child. You will be given that evidence in the form of witness testimony, photographs, videos, and physical evidence. right now we're going to talk about some of that evidence. Caytlyn Naffziger and Dustin Duren were both from Minnesota. Together, they had 2 daughters, Elowen and Valen. In February of 2024, Elowen was 4 years old and Valen was 1. Caytlyn and the defendant did not have a good relationship. It was rocky. By January of 2024, things were not in a good place. That month, the defendant moved from Minnesota to New Hampshire. He brought Elowen with him. Caytlyn and Valen remained in Minnesota. The defendant drove from Minnesota with Elowen, and on January 23rd, he moved into an apartment in Berlin. That apartment was at 1063 Main Street. You can see 1063 Main Street here. It's a multi-family home in Berlin. The defendant's apartment was on the ground floor. After the defendant and Elowen arrived in New Hampshire, the defendant and Caytlyn argued over the phone and through text messages. They argued about the children and their future. On February 27th, Caytlyn and Valen flew to Boston. They took a bus from the airport to New Hampshire, where they met family, and they spent the night with that family on the seacoast. The next day was the 28th. That day, Caytlyn and Valen got a ride and were dropped off at a restaurant in Ossipee. There, they met the defendant and Elowen. After having lunch, the defendant drove them all in his car back to Berlin. They spent the night at 1063 Main Street, that apartment you saw. The defendant believed that after this visit, Caytlyn was going to return home to Minnesota without either of the girls. That was what he wanted. The next day, February 29th, according to the defendant, he asked Caytlyn repeatedly when her aunt was going to come pick her up. He asked her every 15 minutes because he wanted her to leave. He didn't want her there. Caytlyn ignored him. After repeated questions from the defendant about when she was going to leave, Caytlyn told him, "I'm not leaving, I'm staying." During the course of that day, according to the defendant, Caytlyn threatened to call the police and have the children taken away from her. This continued throughout the day. That evening, after a day of asking Caytlyn when she would leave, and a day of Caytlyn not doing what he wanted her to do, the defendant got angry. He was so angry that he started packing up Caytlyn's things so that he could drive her to the seacoast, do it himself. His plan was to load Caytlyn, her things, and both girls into the car, drive Caytlyn to her family and drop her off, and then return back to Berlin with both the girls. The defendant put the younger daughter, Valen, in her car seat. Caytlyn remained sitting on the couch, holding Elowen in her arms. Similar to that photo. Caytlyn did not want to leave. The defendant tried to grab Elowen from Caytlyn, but Caytlyn would not let go. She continued to hold Elowen. She didn't want to leave. This made the defendant even angrier. Angry that Caytlyn refused to leave his apartment, and angry that she refused to let go of her daughter Elowen, the defendant had had enough. In his mind, the line had been crossed. Those are his words. Those are the words he told the police, and he described to them why he killed Caytlyn and what was going through his head. By refusing to allow him to take her child from her arms, Caytlyn had crossed the line. This is a diagram of the defendant's apartment at 1063 Main Street. If you look at the living room, you can see that there is a couch, a coffee table in front of it, and then a desk on the other side of the room. Those black bars that you see represent doorways in the apartment. And you can see the back door is down a hallway on the left side. Caytlyn was sitting on the couch in front of the coffee table with Ellen on her lap. According to the defendant, after he tried and failed to take Ellen from Caytlyn as she sat on the couch, he crossed the room and went to his desk. From his desk, he grabbed this, his Beretta 9mm semi-automatic pistol. That gun had a loaded magazine in it, but no bullet in the chamber. According to the defendant, after he grabbed the gun, he racked it in a slide bag, putting a bullet in the chamber. The gun was now ready to fire. The defendant walked back across the room from his desk, around the coffee table, and stood in front of Caytlyn, to her left. He grabbed Ellen and ripped her from her mother's arms with his left arm. He was holding that pistol in his right. After grabbing Ellen, holding her in his left arm, he stepped back and pointed his gun at Caytlyn's head. At this point, Caytlyn was sitting on the couch alone. She was unarmed. The defendant stood between Caytlyn and the exit. Ellen went in one arm, gun in the other. At that time, Caytlyn did not have a car. She did not have a bus ticket, and her family was hours away. As Caytlyn sat on that couch, holding Ellen in his arm, stepping back, the defendant pulled the trigger. He did not miss. He fired one bullet. That bullet entered Caytlyn's skull from the left side of her head, traveled through her brain, and exited the right side. The gunshot was loud. According to the defendant, Ellen immediately started grabbing her ear and complaining of the noise. The defendant went to the garage and put her in the car. This is what the defendant told the detectives later about what he was thinking at that moment after shooting Caytlyn in the head. He told them that he knew, in his words, that he was screwed. He understood what had happened, and he understood the consequences. He went back in the house. He got Valen, who was still in her car seat. He grabbed clothes for himself and for the girls. He grabbed food and water. He grabbed pillows and blankets. He put all of these things into his car. He grabbed his desktop computer. You can see it there in the defendant's car. After packing up those supplies with both girls in the car, the defendant started to drive. The defendant left his apartment in Berlin sometime between 5:38 p.m. and 6 p.m. on February 29th. He drove to Concord, arriving a little bit before 9 p.m. In Concord, the defendant sent a video of the girls to his mother, and then he called his parents. At 10:08 p.m. in Concord, he called them and told them what he had done. He said, "I killed Caytlyn." He said, "You should probably call the police." He also said, "I'm going to go dark, and I'm turning off my phone." He said he would turn himself in, but he wanted some time with the girls before he did it. At about 10:22 p.m., the defendant did turn off his phone. According to him, he drove west into New York State. At some point, He stopped, and he and the girls slept in the car in the back seat. According to the defendant, when he woke up the next morning, he decided to turn himself in. So he started driving back to New Hampshire. As the defendant drove through Keene the morning of March 1st, he decided to have breakfast somewhere with his girls. While driving, he was seen and he was placed under arrest. The murder weapon, that 9mm Beretta semi-automatic pistol, was in the door, still loaded. That was March 1st. The evidence in this case will prove to you, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the defendant is guilty of knowing second-degree murder and the alternative charge of reckless second-degree murder for killing Caytlyn Naffziger. It will also prove that he committed the crimes of reckless conduct with a deadly weapon and endangerment of a child. The evidence will prove to you that the defendant was not provoked when he pulled that trigger, and that the killing of Caytlyn Naffziger was not justified. When asked by a detective if Caytlyn had threatened to harm anyone, he said no. When asked by a detective if he knew he was endangering Ellen by firing a gun so close to her, he said yes. The evidence will prove to you that the defendant caused Caytlyn's death merely because he was angry and nothing more. You will hear testimony during this trial from state troopers and police officers who will describe how they investigated this case and how they gathered important pieces of evidence. You will hear from the medical examiner who conducted an autopsy of Caytlyn's body. An intelligence analyst with the New Hampshire State Police will describe for you how she used cell phone location data to map the defendant's movements before he turned his phone off. You will hear testimony from an expert firearms examiner who will tell you that the gun that fired the bullet that killed Caytlyn was the defendant's. And you will hear what the defendant told the police when they interviewed him and when he confessed. His version of the story. After his arrest, the defendant spoke with the state police at length. That interview was audio and video recorded. You will be able to see it for yourselves. You will be able to see the defendant's body language, his demeanor, and his tone of voice. You will see that the defendant was calm and in control when he described killing Caytlyn Naffziger. I've already shown you a few of the things that he said during that interview. You will see those and more presented during this trial. Those statements are just some of the evidence that will prove the defendant is guilty. Caytlyn is dead. She is dead because the defendant became angry when she refused to leave his apartment. And she is dead because she would not stop holding her 4-year-old daughter. And that made the defendant mad. So he grabbed his gun, took Caytlyn's daughter away from her, and shot her in the head. After you've heard all the evidence in this case, it will be up to you, the jury, to deliberate and deliver a verdict. When that time comes, when you have had all of the evidence placed in front of you, you will know, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the defendant is guilty. You will know that the defendant murdered Caytlyn Naffziger. Just like the defendant knew from the moment that he fired his gun, you will know that he's guilty.
This case is about broken promises, secret plans, and a father's unyielding love. It's about a Marine reacting to a threat toward his beloved daughter. A horrific tragedy, but not a criminal offense. Dustin Duren is not guilty. Dustin, a Marine veteran, responded to a threat when he shot Caytlyn one time. He saw his daughter being held hostage in front of him. He believed his daughter was in danger of being hurt, in danger of being a pawn in a custody dispute, in danger of being taken away from him, in danger of being kidnapped. The law allows for deadly force to be used against another in certain circumstances. The law says Dustin's actions were justified. He's not guilty of murder. He is not guilty of reckless conduct. He is not guilty of endangering the welfare of a child. You will hear that Caytlyn agreed with a plan to let Dustin take their daughter, Berlin, New Hampshire, from Minnesota, and that she would follow later with their younger daughter, Caytlyn. You will hear that she later changed her mind, but did not tell Dustin. Instead, she flew to Boston with their 1-year-old Caytlyn, and then planned with her aunt to take Elwyn and Caytlyn from their father in the middle of the night while he was sleeping. To carry out the secret plan, Caytlyn and Caytlyn went to Berlin, stayed the night at Dustin's, and then ignored Dustin's requests for her to leave. Dustin decided he would need to bring Caytlyn back to the seacoast where her aunt lived. And when he tried to get the kids ready to leave, Caytlyn told Dustin no, she was not leaving. She demanded Dustin pay her more money. She threatened Dustin she was going to call the police and lie to them, accusing him of kidnapping Elwyn. She told Dustin she was taking the kids back to Minnesota and he would never see them again. While making these threats, Caytlyn remained seated on the couch, holding on to Elwyn. She would not let go of Elwyn when Dustin tried to free her. She gripped Elwyn. She tugged Elwyn. She bear hugged Elwyn. Elwyn was being held hostage right in front of Dustin. Dustin did not want to hurt Elwyn. She was crying. He was worried she was being hurt. On the third attempt to free Elwyn from Caytlyn's grip, Elwyn let out a shriek. This was a startling and terrifying reaction that caused something in Dustin to tick. In his fear for Elwyn and his need to protect her, he walked a couple feet over to his desk, got his gun, chambered around, pulled Elwyn to safety, and fired one round into Caytlyn's head. Dustin Duren defended his daughter. He is not guilty. You will hear that evidence through the state's case and through the defense's case. But now I want to talk to you about Dustin. Dustin is a father and he is a Marine. These two things shape his identity and his decision making. Dustin enlisted with the Marines when he was 18 years old. He received extensive training in firearms. He was drilled with firearms, expected to be able to assemble, load, aim, and shoot a firearm quickly, automatically, without conscious thought. Use of a firearm became automatic and instinctual to him, something that he could do quickly, accurately, and without forethought. He was trained to use a firearm to respond to threats. You will hear that Dustin was the most proficient shooter in boot camp and the squadron high shooter during annual marksmanship training. He became a certified marksmanship coach and taught hundreds of Marines how to perfect their shooting. You will also hear that Dustin had been diagnosed with service-connected PTSD and has suffered bouts of depression in the past. Before meeting Caytlyn in 2019, Dustin felt like his life was meaningless. He had no real purpose, no real reason to live. But shortly after beginning a relationship with Caytlyn, she became pregnant with their first child. Dustin's mental health began to improve. He was beginning to believe he had a purpose, having a family. He and Caytlyn lived together at his parents' home. Soon after Elwyn was born, they moved to Las Vegas and lived there together. Dustin was Elwyn's primary caretaker. He and Elwyn were bonded. At her very first Christmas, Caytlyn flew home to Minnesota, leaving Dustin and their 1-year-old Elwyn behind. You will hear that Dustin's memory of that Christmas burns bright to this day. Dustin was feeling awful about the meager Christmas he could only provide for his daughter, but her pure joy that day shifted his whole mindset. He saw her big smile and her joy, and it was a pivotal moment in his life. He thought, this is my purpose. This is my life. Elwyn. From that moment, it was like a whole world had changed. Dustin's view on everything had changed. His entire life turned to Elwyn. The two were bonded. Eventually, Caytlyn became pregnant with their second child, Valen. She was born in Las Vegas in January of 2023. By July of 2023, Dustin and Caytlyn separated, and all four returned to Minnesota. Dustin moved back in with his parents. Caytlyn moved in with a friend. For several months, they tried co-parenting. After a few months of this arrangement, Dustin and Caytlyn came to a compromise in which they would both move to New Hampshire, but live separately. They decided that Dustin would travel by car to New Hampshire first, taking Elwyn with him, and then Caytlyn would fly out later with 1-year-old Valen and leave her with Dustin. Caytlyn would then return to Minnesota for a few months to work and save some money, and then move to New Hampshire permanently in the early summer when she would have seasonal employment with her Aunt Brenda in Hampton. Dustin prepared for the trip to New Hampshire. He found an apartment in Berlin and showed Caytlyn photos of the apartment. Caytlyn gave Dustin a bunch of Elwyn and Valen's stuff to take with him. The day Dustin left, he picked Elwyn up from where Caytlyn lived at her friend's house, and Caytlyn willingly handed over Elwyn. Caytlyn did not call the police. She did not report a kidnapping. She agreed to this plan. On their trip east, Dustin called and texted Caytlyn several times with updates. He sent pictures of Elwyn. After Dustin got to New Hampshire, he and Caytlyn had several arguments over the phone about money. Caytlyn wanted to claim both girls on their taxes and wanted Dustin to send her money. Caytlyn threatened to call the police and falsely claim that Dustin had kidnapped Elwyn and had taken her to New Hampshire without Caytlyn's permission. Dustin was worried that Caytlyn wouldn't bring Valen and that the girls would be separated. You will hear that when Caytlyn made this threat a few weeks before this incident, Dustin was alarmed. He called Caytlyn's mother. He called Caytlyn's father. He called the Berlin Police Department. He offered to let Caytlyn claim both girls on their taxes, paid for her plane ticket to New Hampshire, and sent her some money. 2 weeks later, Caytlyn and Valen did fly to Boston, as planned, on the 27th of February. Dustin knew when they would arrive in Boston, but no other details, because Caytlyn did not share those. He did not know how Caytlyn and Valen were getting to Berlin or when. He did not know if Caytlyn planned on staying in Berlin or where she would stay. He assumed she wanted to stay a couple days in Berlin to visit with Elwyn and offered for her to stay with him and the girls, but Caytlyn declined this invitation. Caytlyn had other plans, secret plans she did not share with Dustin. You will hear about the plan that Caytlyn created with her Aunt Brenda. Brenda will tell you that she lives in Hampton. She spoke to Caytlyn about her visit to New Hampshire. She will tell you that Caytlyn and Valen flew into Boston and shuttled to Seabrook, where Brenda and her friend picked them up. Brenda will tell you that Caytlyn and Valen spent the night in Hampton, and while there, Brenda and Caytlyn came up with a plan to take the kids from Dustin.
Action. Approach.
While Caytlyn was visiting with her Aunt Brenda the night before she met Dustin, Brenda and Caytlyn came up with a plan to take the kids from Dustin. Brenda will tell you that she agreed to bring Caytlyn and Valen to meet up with Dustin and Elowen, drop them off, and wait a day or two for Caytlyn to call her for a ride back with both of the girls. Caytlyn would sneak the two kids out while Dustin was sleeping, and Brenda would pick them up and take Caytlyn and her kids to the airport to fly back to Minnesota. Caytlyn already had a return ticket to Minnesota, and Brenda was going to buy a ticket for Elowen. And Valen was young enough that she could sit on her mom's lap. You will hear that when Caytlyn texted Dustin that Brenda was driving her up, Dustin suggested they meet up at a spot halfway between Hampton and Berlin. And he found a restaurant in Ossipee. Dustin believed that Caytlyn and Brenda would have a meal with him and the girls, and then Caytlyn and Brenda would return to Hampton, while Dustin and the girls would head north to Berlin. The next day, Dustin and Elowen drove to Ossipee and got to the restaurant first, where they waited inside the restaurant, waiting for Caytlyn and Valen. When Caytlyn arrived, she called Dustin, asking him to come outside and help with Valen's things. Dustin and Elowen went outside to meet Caytlyn and Valen. Brenda was already gone. They put Valen's stuff in the car, and the four of them, Elowen, Valen, Dustin, and Caytlyn, went into the restaurant to eat. Dustin and Caytlyn did not have any real conversation. Dustin visited with Valen, Caytlyn with Elowen. Caytlyn started asking Elowen if she could come see Elowen's new house. Dustin was confused, since Caytlyn had said she did not want to stay with them. Caytlyn did not speak directly with Dustin, instead saying things to Elowen for Dustin to overhear. Dustin agreed that Caytlyn could spend a night. And so after dinner, all four of them got into Dustin's car, drove back to Berlin. Caytlyn sat in the back seat with the girls. That night, Dustin slept in his bed with Valen, and Caytlyn and Elowen slept on an air mattress between the bedroom and the living room. The next day, they all went to the Berlin Library for children's story time and arts and crafts. They came home and had lunch. Caytlyn spent the afternoon playing with the girls and not speaking to Dustin. Dustin tried to ask Caytlyn what her plan was when she was leaving, but Caytlyn would not answer him. Dustin continued to ask, and Caytlyn continued to ignore her all afternoon. Caytlyn played with Elowen and Valen in Elowen's bedroom, and every so often, Dustin would go to the doorway of the room and ask Caytlyn when and how she was leaving. Caytlyn did not respond. At one point, she picked up her phone and started using it. Dustin didn't know if Caytlyn was messaging someone. Her silence was telling. Dustin was suspicious. Caytlyn's behavior concerned him. Something was off. Eventually, once it started to get dark, Dustin told Caytlyn that since she wasn't responding, he was going to drive her all the way back to Hampton. And he told Caytlyn it was time to leave. Dustin was stressed because it was a long drive, and by the time he dropped Caytlyn off in Hampton and then drove all the way back to Berlin with the girls would have been up all night. Caytlyn sat down on the couch. Dustin put Valen in a car seat and sat on the hallway floor. He went back into the living room and saw Caytlyn go over and pick up Elowen, return to the couch, and sat Elowen on her lap. Elowen straddled Caytlyn's knee. Dustin told Caytlyn, "Come on, we're leaving," and tried to take Elowen to get her ready to go. Caytlyn tugged Elowen tightly and pulled her back, wrapping her arms around Dustin's daughter in a bear hug. Dustin let go and asked Caytlyn to let go of Elowen, and Caytlyn said no. Dustin kept asking Caytlyn to let go of Elowen and get ready to leave. Caytlyn started demanding Dustin pay child support, give her $2,000 per month. Caytlyn told Dustin she was going to take Elowen and Valen back to Minnesota and Dustin would never see them again. Caytlyn again threatened Dustin that she would call the cops and tell them Dustin had taken Elowen without permission. Caytlyn was still holding on to Elowen, her arms wrapped tightly around Elowen, restraining her. Caytlyn told Dustin again that he would never see his kids. Dustin felt like Caytlyn was holding Elowen hostage. He was seeing his daughter held hostage in front of his eyes. He kept begging Caytlyn to let go of Elowen and to just get ready to leave. Caytlyn refused and kept saying she was taking the kids and he would never see them again. At this point, Valen was crying. Elowen was upset and crying. The situation was overwhelming. Dustin tried again to free Elowen, but Caytlyn yanked her away again. Dustin didn't want to force anything, so he just let Elowen go. He tried again to persuade Caytlyn to let go of Elowen, and she refused. She continued to threaten Dustin. Dustin didn't know who Caytlyn had been messaging on her phone, whether there was someone outside waiting. He was suspicious. He was concerned. He was fearful. Dustin could see his gun on the desk in the living room in close proximity to Caytlyn. Dustin knew that Caytlyn knew how to use the gun. He himself taught her how to handle and shoot a gun. He couldn't take his eyes off Caytlyn and Elowen while Caytlyn was holding Elowen hostage right next to a firearm. Dustin tried one more time to take Elowen. Tried to hold one of Caytlyn's wrists while wrapping his arm behind Elowen so that he could free Elowen from Caytlyn's bear hug. Caytlyn did not let go and instead got more aggressive. She braced her foot against the living room table and pulled back hard. Ellen screamed, a piercing cry like she was in pain. Immediately, everything felt extremely dire to Dustin, like Ellen was in immediate danger. Hearing Ellen scream was like a tick. The only thing he was thinking was that he had to save Ellen. In an autonomous motion, like he had been trained by the military, he grabbed his gun. He had no thoughts in his head other than he needed to save Ellen. He acted instinctually, automatically, and reflexively. In less than 3 seconds, he grabbed the gun, pulled Ellen out of the way, and eliminated the threat, shooting Caytlyn in the head. Ellen was safe in Dustin's arms. He is a Marine. He acts like a Marine. He did what a Marine is trained to do. Dustin saved Ellen. Dustin took the girls and left the apartment in his Subaru. He needed to make sure the girls were okay and to get out of that apartment. He didn't want Ellen to see anything. After driving south for about 2 hours, he stopped for gas in Concord. He called his mom and told her he shot Caytlyn. He asked for his dad to call the police. He also sent them a video of the girls in the car at that moment to show them the girls were safe. He said he was going to spend a few more hours with the girls before he turned himself in. And that's what he did. He spent a few more hours driving with, talking with the girls, making sure they were okay, making sure they knew he loved them before turning around and driving back to New Hampshire. He planned to get breakfast with the girls before he turned himself in, but the police located him before he was able to do so. And you will see Dustin's arrest on video. You will see how he complied with the police commands, how he warned the police there were kids in the car, how he warned them there was a gun in the driver's side door. And he then gave a lengthy interview to the police. The state will probably show you Dustin's interview and what he told them after his arrest. This is a case about broken promises, secret plans, and a father's unyielding love. It's about a Marine reacting to a threat toward his beloved daughter, a horrific tragedy, but not a criminal offense. Dustin is not guilty. At the end of the evidence, the judge will instruct you on the law, and he may explain to you that what the law allows when defending others. He may instruct you that a person is justified in using deadly force against another when he reasonably believes that such person is committing or about to commit a kidnapping, is likely to use any unlawful force against the person present while committing or attempting to commit a burglary, or is likely to use any unlawful force in the commission of a felony against the actor within his own dwelling or home. When he shot Caytlyn, Dustin reasonably believed that Caytlyn was about to kidnap Ellen, and that Caytlyn was using unlawful force to commit a crime. She was holding Ellen hostage in front of him, threatening that she would take his kids to Minnesota, and he would never see them again. Caytlyn would rather hurt Ellen than let her go. And when Caytlyn hurt Ellen, Dustin acted to save her. Dustin's entire life purpose was to be a good father for Ellen and Balin, and he did what he believed was necessary to protect Ellen. The judge may instruct you. You cannot convict Dustin unless the state proves to you not only that Dustin killed Caytlyn, but that he did so without justification. You must find Dustin not guilty unless you are convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that Dustin did not act to defend his daughter and prevent kidnapping. The state will not meet its burden. Dustin was justified under the law. He acted to protect his daughter. After hearing all the evidence, we are confident you will find him not guilty.